Hi, everyone. This is Stephanie Michael Brensis from Brock Solutions, and I'd just like to welcome everyone on the phone and watching online to the first of our Webinar Wednesdays series. We're going to be doing webinars for the next 4 weeks in the lead up to the Industry Week show, all around topics about demystifying manufacturing IT to drive business value. So just a quick logistics point here. How we do these webinars, we try to keep them kind of to a punchy 30-minute duration, where we present the content for about 20 or 25 minutes and then leave time for questions and answers. So it is meant to be interactive. How you can deliver questions is through the chat box that you should see somewhere on your screen. So anytime throughout the presentation, please feel free to send some questions here, and we'll try to get to them at the end or via another type of follow-up. And at the conclusion of this presentation, when I'm done the slides, we'll turn the audio back on so one can ask questions just through your phones. So without further ado, just a bit of an introduction of myself and our company. My name is Steph, and I lead one of our business units here at Brock Solutions, and I also lead our MES practice. So very happy to share some perspectives on the marketplace. That's really what we're here to do today. It's really to give a primer of this whole manufacturing IT space. And the way to do that and how we've kind of structured this the next 20 minutes, I'm going to share a little bit of what this space looks like and what's informing our views, as well as talk about the confusion that surrounds this space and some of the questions, the typical questions we hear when someone wants to understand what is manufacturing IT, what is MES, what is MOM, what is smart manufacturing, etc. So we're going to talk a little bit about that in the level setting phase, and then I'll share a perspective on what we see in terms of the actual market. So the players out there that are developing or have developed solutions to serve this market. I'm going to share a perspective on what we think are game changers in the market, and then we'll kind of talk about next steps and what we typically recommend manufacturers to do when they're getting started in some sort of manufacturing IT journey. If we do have time, I've got the standard slides of who Brock Solutions is, so I'll pull that up for anyone that isn't familiar with what our company does, but would rather talk through any questions or have any conversations near the end of this presentation. So when we talk about this space, what I've got here is just a drawing that depicts a typical environment when it comes to a manufacturing enterprise. So there's the level 1 and 2 space, the controls and automation and the devices that live on your plant floor. At the opposite level of level 4, there's typical functions that live in your ERP or your planning systems, kind of your higher level financials, might have HR, CRM, etc. The space we're going to talk about today, this manufacturing IT space, or this MES and MOM space, really lives in between those two layers. And what I've tried to do here is capture the typical functionality that we see being delivered in these layers across an enterprise and connected to a supply chain. So you can see some of them there. I won't read too many of them, but this is really that layer where we're gluing together the automation and the ERP and many ancillary systems to provide execution activities like recipe management, so actually making sure the operations are making the right thing at the right time with the right ingredients. It can be track and trace and genealogy, so tracing right back from the beginning of your raw material consumption through to the end and beyond, where your products go. It could be things like performance monitoring and reporting when you're looking at your equipment and your assets and you're trying to assess their performance, how, what their OEE is, what your downtime is, etc. And it can be some of those functions that you see there in the darker gray, things like operational intelligence, maintenance systems that kind of hover between that level 3 and level 4 layer. So what really happens in this space is something from the beginning of the process. So it's not just something within the four walls of a manufacturing operation, but starts from ideation. So that's just a fancy term for R&D, what's happening in, in the product creation side. That moves through to the planning and orchestrates through to the actual manufacturing, and then out the door when the products go and become service. There's a requirement for some sort of service information. This space really deals with all of those functions, and then really how to coordinate and exchange information and activities with the broader supply chain. When we talk about the market, what we're going to talk about is really based on our experience. So this space, this real-time operational manufacturing IT level 3 space and everything it's connected to, that's really what we do day in and day out. This is Brock Solutions business. So we certainly, our views of what the market looks like are based on, the school of hard knocks and our everyday activities with our customers. It's also informed by our work and our conversations through MESA. So for those that aren't familiar with MESA, and I won't read this definition verbatim, but MESA is a nonprofit community of manufacturers like many of you that are on the phone, people like Brock, so systems integrators, and also the actual solution providers or vendors that service this space. So MESA is an excellent place to kind of learn about best practices, and there's a whole library of white papers and conversations that come out of MESA that certainly inform our perspective on this market. And then finally, because Brock and most of our customers have a little bit of everything in terms of technology, and because Brock implements a variety of different technologies, it's really important that we have a clear perspective and understanding of what the vendors themselves are bringing to the market, what their vision is, what their roadmaps look like. So part of what we're going to share today is based on conversations with our solution provider community and their perspective on what's changing in terms of the market. I would be a little remiss not to share why this is such a confusing space. So I'm just pulling up what typically we would hear as Brock Solutions, weekly, and I don't think I'm exaggerating. We'll get one of these or a combination of these these questions from our customers in the manufacturing world. So a lot of it kind of comes down to questions of who the players are. If you look, let's say under MES, you can easily come up with a list of something like 700 players in this space. Manufacturing IT, what does that really mean? What does MOM mean? There's a lot of confusion around just the space in general. There's also confusion about who the winners are. So is there a single winner? We know we need to go down this track. Who should we work with? How do we work with someone that's a system integrator versus a solution provider? What's that all look like? And I guess the question that we probably hear most often when people are new to this space and are trying to understand how to leverage it to drive value in their manufacturing environment is, I thought ERP already did this. I thought, when we spent tens of millions, hundreds of millions, in some cases billions or billion on this ERP solution, I thought that really covered those execution functions and some of that functionality that I thought existed within this space. So in light of all this confusion, and I've got a little bit of a rhetorical question for everyone that's on the phone here, but this is a kind of confusing marketplace. It's confusing out of the chute. Is this option just too hard to define? Is this just an impossible space to define? And isn't this the market that's riddled with all sorts of horror stories when it comes to implementations? And I think I heard MES, that's kind of a dirty word, manufacturing IT. Oh, please don't give me one of those. Is the market full of what in reality is just a bunch of loosely affiliated one-trick ponies? And you'll have to forgive my my candid way of looking at this market, but anyone who knows me, I kind of would prefer to do that than make it maybe more elegant. Is it a sinkhole of money for solution providers? So the people that are investing in this space, the vendors themselves, are they making any money on selling this stuff? Why is it so hard to explain to my leadership? This market is just impossible to capture. I can't really explain it, especially in light of the big expensive ERP rollout that we just did that was supposed to solve all plant problems. So is that this manufacturing IT market? Is it behind door number A, or is it door number B here, or door number 2? Is this market getting executive attention because there's a perceived and known gap between what's happening in real time and the planning systems that are saying what should happen? Are the solutions that are being delivered working and being rolled out across entire enterprises? Is this market actually profitable? Are solution providers and systems integrators growing their business as they had expected? Is it driving significant measurable business value? Fancy way of saying, once I implemented this technology and changed my processes and got my people engaged, did the rubber meet the road? Did I actually get the return on my investment? And finally, is it more complementary to my ERP than competing? Is it something that's actually helping me wring the value out of that big ERP investment? So with those two options, I think in our professional opinion and definitely what we see in the market, the answer is really directionally towards the latter. So this is really option B. We are seeing solutions that are being implemented successfully, driving measurable business value. The technical constraints that there once were not so pervasive and obvious as they are now. Many global companies are going through kind of the beginning of their transfer and asking a lot of the questions that we talked about earlier and trying to figure out how to harness this space to add value. And I would go so far to say there's also concern that if they don't, they're going to be looking in the rearview mirror at, and their competitors are going to be leapfrogging in front of them. At the same time, solution providers, integrators that have made these big investments are certainly starting to see the return and the business growth on delivering solutions in this space. So going forward, all indications are that this market will continue to grow and be profitable and is evolving and kind of moving away from that early adopter phase into something more concrete, and that's driving value. I'd say with the caveat though, as solution providers or vendors in this space continue to consolidate and maybe pick up more piece parts or acquire more solutions, they're going to expect much quicker profitable growth. So if you think about it, as the matures, as the technology becomes more robust, a lot of these investments are expected to accrue the value in short order, and we are seeing that when we talk to the vendor community. I think the whole question around the horror stories having to do with implementation, some of the software stability issues that were certainly, and I can tell you, certainly it wasn't just one product or another, all the products that were in this space in years past, stability was a concern. Stability, scalability, taking an off-the-shelf product and configuring it versus customizing it, that was a challenge. And I can say as an implementer of these solutions, those concerns around software stability are becoming less of a concern to our customers and to us, frankly, as implementers of these solutions. I think at the same time, the horror stories around implementation are kind of taking a back seat to the success stories out there in the market. plants that are implementing this in some part of their environment are reaping rewards, and we've certainly seen a move to actually capture the benefits, share the benefits, and continue to roll out. I think manufacturers are getting clever and have more clarity around determining which should live in their ERP, what should live in their MES or manufacturing IT, and what should live in their automation and controls layers. So some of that confusion is going away, a lot in part to do with standards like the S95 standards, a little bit more experience in the space. This piece is getting a little bit easier to figure out. And quite honestly, the whole convergence of IT, IS, call it whatever you'd like at the IT layer, and OT or engineering, operations technologies, that convergence both technically and probably more importantly, organizationally is really happening, and in many cases has happened already, which is actually a critical success factors in these implementations going well. Once all these systems are kind of being implemented and are a little bit more, cookie cutter is not the right word, but that are more stable than in years past, what we really see is that the next big wave or challenge to manage around the space is how to harness the power of those systems in a way to really have intelligence on the operations. So understand more in a more predictive way what's happening and how to respond in more real time to operational concerns. So if we were to kind of look at the actual landscape of solution providers or vendors that service this space, there's really two types. So you can distill it down to two different types of companies that are building portfolios to service this layer. And they either have their roots in software, so that like the SAPs or the Oracles or the Dassaults of the world that are traditional software companies, or they have their roots in automation. So the Rockwells, the Siemens, the Schneiders of the world, they're all have fundamentally different approaches to how they're building this portfolio and how they're bringing it to market. And as an outsider third party, it's interesting to watch how all of this is kind of happening in real time as they continue to acquire and build out their software portfolios. But at the end of the day, there isn't a dominant player that's emerged. So this isn't like the ERP space, where there's one that's kind of out there and is a dominant player with a couple of others. They still haven't bubbled to the top in terms of, hey, this is the go-to solution for the space. I think at the same time, the buyer is really changing. So where in years past, these solutions would be bought and serviced and supported by engineering groups or operations groups, the buyer's actually changing more to a supply chain or the leadership level at the CIO or VP of supply chain. So that changes a lot of dynamics too, and how they evaluate how this technology is going to be bought and implemented in their environment. But at the end of the day, if I were to kind of take a broad stroke at this market and look at it, I would say everyone, whether they're in the software side or the automation side, is struggling in some ways, in their own way, either around focus or size or what markets to penetrate or their relevance to their own internal operations and how to sell ideas internally. Are really, it's not a slam dunk in terms of the space and the vendors that are building portfolios to service this space. At the same time, though, I think there are some game changers. And I think a handful of the big players that are involved in this space are really completing and building a vision around connecting the whole enterprise. So you can see there all the steps of an enterprise and beyond the four walls. That's really driven, this isn't some kind of technical, exciting, step change in technology that's driving it. It's really being driven by the manufacturers themselves who now have intelligent equipment and need to combine it in such a way to have the connected enterprise and visibility across their enterprise in order to make better decisions. At the same time, they're adding to what is already a pretty crowded portfolio of products. And I have to tell you, I was in a meeting last week with a big solution provider in the space, and they shared a slide that kind of had the different acquisitions that they made over the last 5 years, and it was amazing. Just the investment, the piece parts that are being pulled together to actually deliver solutions that would connect the enterprise. So this is a serious play for all of these players. There's a lot of investment, and it is the wave of the future in terms of what manufacturers are going to get exposed to. On top of that, our governments are getting in the mix. So, I'm sure many of you have heard of smart manufacturing or Industry 4.0, where whole governments are looking at the connected enterprise as a differentiator for manufacturing within their country and how to spur manufacturing and be leaders in the manufacturing space. So all of this kind of would summarize as what feels like a game changer to us that are out there in the market every day. It's less about get me one of these MESs or get me one of these OEs and get me one of these pieces of technology, and more about combining their internal operations, IT, to deliver solutions that connect the enterprise. Now, all that kind of sounds good, but there are still challenges. So what I would say kind of in conclusion around the market in general is we definitely see large manufacturers responding to this vision. So manufacturers are saying, at the leadership level, especially CIO, VP supply chain, VP, of operations, engineering, et cetera, see the value in this and are responding to that connected vision. In reality, though, they're buying pieces and parts. It's not a big bang. It's not a one size fits all to deploy. And if I were a player in the market, if I were a point player that's providing one function maybe over another, my comment there is point solutions beware. This is really about consolidation and a clearness of vision that connects the enterprise. I would also say that manufacturers are really looking beyond the technical when it comes to evaluating these solutions in the space. So they want to understand not just that it's going to work and that it functionally fits their needs, but that the companies that they're working with are a fit for their overall vision. They're financially stable. There's a fit and a desire to partner versus be a solution, seller of a piece of software. At the same time, like I mentioned earlier, it's not a panacea. There are still many complex challenges. The technology, for instance, is not yet integrated under the hood, and I would say that applies to everybody in the space. So because this space is really acquisition based, there's a whole series of products that need to be integrated, so that's a technology challenge. There isn't one size fits all that would solve many of these problems, and there are existing systems, so it's not like customers or manufacturers are just ripping out their investments and replacing them with this. And the one thing that's consistently underestimated that we see is just the infrastructure required to support this type of transformation. That's still going to be a hurdle as companies struggle with what it takes to get information out of their machine layers, what it takes on the network side to segregate networks and all that sort of thing. So there are still traditional challenges that come with this space that didn't necessarily go away. So as we wrap up here, the number one question we hear once people have a bit of a primer on what the space is and have kind of done their homework on what they're looking for in terms of solution providers or potential software packages, they often ask, how do I get started? And the next webinar that Brock's going to do next Wednesday in this 4-point series is really around the tactical, answering some of those questions with some tactical examples and best practices. So you'll hear some tools that Brock uses to capture a business case, build roadmaps, capture requirements, etc. And I think it's a valuable webinar for folks that want to learn. Now that this is great and we want to get started, where and how do we even start? So there will be a lot of learnings around that in the next webinar. On top of that, I do want to make a pitch for an upcoming conference that would also provide value on demystifying this whole space. And that's the IndustryWeek Mesa conference that's happening May 3rd to 5th, and it's in Chicago. Mesa is a big part of that. It's a joint conference with IndustryWeek. There's excellent sessions. All the big players are there. And in terms of Brock, we will have Doug Wilhelm, who's the program manager around manufacturing IT for RJ Reynolds. He's going to be in our booth, and he will share and be happy to share with anyone who's interested the journey he went on as his company figured out how to first justify, implement, and support a big manufacturing IT transition and transformation. So he's a great resource to talk to while you're there. Bottom line, I think it's a great place to go and to hear from others what this space looks like and what their concerns are. So with that, we've got a couple of minutes for questions. I'm not going to go over the Brock spiel. You can see it here, or you can review our website for the high points. But we're going to unmute everybody. If anyone has any questions, please go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Alistair Buchan from Delphi. So I'm kind of, I guess, interested probably in your next session, which is because I'm kind of interested in building the business case, but it's kind of because it's when you have a lot of invested base, a lot of different, let's call them MES systems, but some of them are barely that, and it's looking at across the enterprise how to pull that all together and look at a migration path. That's kind of the thing I'm interested in. Are you going to cover that in the next week's one?
Yes, for sure. So what we'll do in the next session, we basically distill it down to three big things. How do you capture requirements? How do you build a business case? And how do you build an implementation plan, which kind of goes part and parcel with the business case. So what we'll share with you are we'll share some examples of how others have done it and kind of how they look for the return and the wheres to look for it and the hows to socialize and present it. And we'll also share what always happens after the return is, okay, so where do I start? Do I do it, do I do a big bang and do a big implementation in one plant? Do I take a sliver of functionality and roll it out across multiple plants? So for sure we'll discuss and share how others have captured the benefits and the return and how they kind of make the pitch to their leadership on why this makes sense.
Okay, thanks for that. Just one cheeky supplementary question. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make the next two. Is there, I know you've recorded this one, is there a way to reach these offline?
Yeah, there sure is. So after every session, we're recording, and then we will send out an email to all the folks that have accepted. That'll have the link to the actual recorded presentation, and then we'll host it on our website as well.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.